Hello ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to be doing a review of the Centurion Mark 1. This is a Tier 8 British medium. The ultimate goal for me is the Centurion Action X, which I personally think is just a really good looking tank, and from what I've heard it plays really well. I haven't played it personally, but it's got the gun depression that continues down the line. But the Centurion Mark 1 you're going to have to go through in order to get there. And for me, this is just an abysmal grind. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's something you'll definitely struggle with depending on your play style. If you are good at playing mediums, this might not be too difficult for you, but just to give you some perspective of what I'm talking about, let's look at the turrets on this. So the one that I have now is the Tier 8 turret. That's got 254 millimeters of armor on the front. Now it's only got 88 on the sides and the rear, but when you take that into consideration against the one you get when you first purchase the tank, is 127 millimeters of frontal armor, which just about anybody knows that a Tier 8 can fairly easily punch right through. So until you get to this Tier 8 turret, you're going to have a heck of a time getting this tank to put out some damage. You're more or less going to be playing in the back, playing with others, trying to see who's firing, who's already fired, so you can poke out and take a shot with your gun, which the stock gun only has 148 millimeters of penetration at Tier 8. Granted, it's got a 14 to 15.4 rate of fire for rounds per minute, but for me, that hardly made up for it because I didn't have the turret on it. So if we look at the research path for this, we've got two guns up here you can go down. Otherwise, you get the stock turret. Then you get the upgraded turret, the one with the excellent frontal armor. Then you can get this 20-pounder gun, which has a boast of 226 millimeters of penetration with the standard round, and only 230 average damage. The other thing to consider is that the rate of fire is 8 rounds per minute. So I think the reload on this, let's check. So I do have a gun rammer on it. So if we look at firepower, let's see, reload time is 6.33 seconds. So even with 230 damage, it seems like you're waiting a long time. For me anyway, because you wait your 6 seconds, and if you figure an object 140 can put out a 300 plus round of damage about every 5 to 6 seconds, this just seems to fall away, and the Centurion has, until you get that upgraded turret, it really doesn't have anything going for you. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't hate this tank, but it was one of those that I figured out that you're primarily going to use it in a hull down situation. So let's do, I'm going to do a comparison of a few different mediums, and we can kind of see, it'll really become apparent what this tank is actually good for and what it is used for, and I think I may be able to highlight the best ways to use that. So let's go to tanks.gg. I'm going to do a comparison of the Centurion Mark 1, the AMX CDC, and the Russian T-44. The CDC is French, so let's get right into it. So the firepower on the Centurion Mark 1 is 1918, whereas the CDC has a little bit better, 2057, but the T-44 falls away at 1605. So the reason I wanted to do these is because the penetration on the Centurion Mark 1 is 226, which blows both of the others out of the water. So you can really play this thing to penetrate frontally, and you can kind of get through it fairly well that way. See the rate of fire, 8.34 rounds per minute versus 8.57 on the CDC. The T-44 is much slower with a 4.12. The reload time is 7.19 on the Centurion Mark 1 versus 7 on the CDC. So this is slower than the CDC. And the T-44, you can kind of think of the T-44 as a medium tank with a heavy gun on it. And you can also see down here the caliber difference, 83.4 versus a 90 millimeter on the CDC and a 122 millimeter. This is what I was talking about with the heavy gun on a medium chassis. So this is the shell velocity is going to be a lot slower with the bigger round. And the smaller the round gets, the better you get velocity. Ammo capacity, though, is only 65 versus 90 on the CDC. The 26 that the T44 has, a lot of that is because of the size of the round and the rate of fire as well. So aim time, I mean, you put a heavy gun on there, it's going to have a slower aim time, more dispersion, but the aim time is not too bad on the Centurion 1. It's pretty close to the CDC here. It's got slightly slower aim time, not anything that's going to be any big drastic difference. The elevation, you get a little bit more with the other two tanks. You only get 18 degrees with the Centurion 1, but 18 is still plenty. It's more than you're going to use in most cases. The depression, though, is one of the reasons why that I was able to figure out what the Centurion 1 was intended for. So this T44 has only got 5 degrees of gun depression, meaning you're not going to be able to peek over hills very well. The CDC and the Centurion 1 both have 10 degrees of gun depression. And the reason for this is because the CDC especially, we'll get down into it here in a little bit, but the armor on the CDC and especially the hull armor on the Centurion 1 are fairly weak. As we saw earlier, the Centurion 1's got really good frontal armor on the upgraded turret. So that's something that you want to get as soon as you can. But let's look at the mobility here. The forward speed is about the same, but when you get down to engine power, this T44 and the Centurion 1 both are really low on the engine power, but the Centurion 1 is even lower when you consider the power to weight ratio. The CDC is a fast tank. You can see here it's got 35.29 horsepower per ton versus the T44 has only got 19.91, and the Centurion 1 is way down here at 16.7. So you can kind of see that this thing is going to be relatively slow. You get in the rough terrain, and the terrain resistance is actually higher on the CDC. This surprised me when I first saw this. The terrain resistance is more on the CDC than it is on the 44 and the Centurion 1. So the CDC, that's something you want to put, get your skill crews so that you can have smooth ride, things like that. But let's look at the armor and the health for this tank. So with the hull armor is 76.2 millimeters. The CDC is just the CDC is just a tin can essentially. But the T44 has got better hull armor than the Centurion 1. The turret armor on the Centurion 1 beats this T44 all day long. With the exception of the sides and the rear, you get 130 and 100 on this T44. It's got a fairly good strong turret on it. But the Centurion 1, you can see here that it's primarily designed to go hull down, poke only that turret over, and use that gun depression to either snipe, or if he has support and friendly tanks that can help him out, keep the enemies off of his flank, he can keep the Centurion 1 hull down, and he can tear into them if he has that upgraded gun with the 200 plus millimeters of penetration. Health is fairly close across the board, but the shell cost for the CDC, obviously it's a premium tank, so the shell cost is going to be a lot lower. But if we take a look at that, that was the primary reason that I had problems with this tank. Was I enjoy tanks that can go hull down and have a lot of gun depression to allow you to work over hills, but until you get this upgraded turret, you're going to have a heck of a time doing it, because you also have to stay in the back and do it sniper style, so to speak. So, is this a great tank? I would say no. Is it a good hull down tank? Very much yes. At the same time, you also have a fairly low alpha, but you do get good penetration once you get to that upgraded turret and the upgraded gun that you can put on it. So I wouldn't say that it's a great tank, but if you know how to use the tank to its strengths, and now that you know that you can use the gun depression and the turret armor to keep things in your favor, so to speak, as long as you can keep the enemy from rushing you and flanking you, you can do fairly well with this tank. So essentially, let's go back to tanks GG here, and let's go to the full list. So if you have a hull down Centurion Mark 1, let's see, we'll do mediums, and we'll go down to tier 8 Centurion Mark 1. So let's go to the 3D model. Let's go to visual so it looks the way you're going to see it on the battlefield. And if we put this gun, let's see, all the way hull down. Alright, if we take this thing hull down like you're going to see it, and we look at the armor values, if you can manage to keep just this turret down, its effective armor is really substantial here. Like, you're going to have a hard time getting through this unless you get the relatively flat spot here with 250 millimeters. You can just rock it all day long, unless, I don't even know if you can get to the cupola with this angle, but if they're not all the way hauled down, then you can get a piece of this this cupola. 90 millimeters, you can get through there. So that's something to get to if they're not completely hauled down, or if they're not angled all the way back to the full 10 degrees. You can get this cupola, or you can get the sides here. Otherwise, this tank is fairly easy to penetrate. 99 millimeters effective armor. Up top here, it's only got 150. So the hull is really easy to penetrate. If he's hauled down, playing his tank correctly, you're going to have a heck of a time getting through this turret. Unless you've got 250 plus millimeters of armor and you get a high roll, or you can manage to get this cupola. So that's my opinion of the Centurion Mark 1. Like I said, not my favorite tank, but if you can manage to get it hauled down and you can work that, then it'll work out fairly well for you. So hope you guys enjoyed the review. Don't forget to view, hit the like button, leave comments down below. I'm kind of looking for other tanks to review, so if you guys leave suggestions, I can pick the next one to review, as well as possibly get some good gameplay footage for you. So leave the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching. I will see you next time.